Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. Today we're going to be doing a Pull 3 Kazar Zoo build. Now this one honestly only has one Pull 3 card, so if your first Pull 3 card was Mojo, perfect. This works as a transition build as well. Now really the only thing that I changed between our Pull 2 and our Pull 3 build was taking out Korg and adding in Mojo. Now I have mixed feelings and mixed emotions about this list, because a lot of what we're seeing in the meta, this Kazar Zoo build will hold up against, which surprises me, because you think eventually the Kazar Zoo would fall off, but it really doesn't. It just depends on what you're seeing in the meta. If you're seeing a lot of Killmonger, then yeah, definitely pivot away from this list. But for like Professor X lockdown lists, this can do really well at spreading out our power early, and then we can elevate it even further if it looks like we're getting outpaced or outpowered by a Professor X lockdown, a storm location. We just have a lot of kind of sneaky power push that a list like this I probably shouldn't have. Now we have covered both a Pool 1 and a Pool 2 version. If you want to see gameplay of those, if you want to see deck explanations of those decks, I will leave a link to both in the description down below. But otherwise, let's look at today's list. We have several one-cost cards. Squirrel Girl is probably going to be our biggest proponent in late game power push. We're going to typically hold her to drop alongside either a Blue Marvel or an Iron Man to drop some surprise power onto the opponent. Now, some games we will drop Chavez, but most of the time she's just there to give us some of our other resources more consistently. More often than not, it's going to be more beneficial to do a Blue Marvel, to do an Iron Man alongside either our last one-cost card, but typically we want that last one-cost card to be Squirrel Girl or Ant-Man for a surprise kind of last turn power push. Now, the way that this deck list kind of flows is that if we have Angela, we're going to play her on the board early. If we have Iceman, that is our priority turn 1 drop. Angela is our priority turn 2 drop. If it looks like we're running into a list that might run a Killmonger, we're going to use armor, or we can use armor to counteract any kind of destruction deck list that we're seeing, which are very, very prevalent right now. We also have Cosmo to stop the really strong on reveal cards that we see and that are very common in the meta right now. And it helps protect our ongoing cards in our Kazar, our Iron Man, our Blue Marvel, because in a Cosmo lane, the opponent's not going to be able to drop an Enchantress to take away those abilities. Now, typically we will want to play Angela, maybe a couple of our 1 or 2 cost cards in that location, and then start looking for a lane that's going to benefit from us dropping our Kazar, our Blue Marvel, and then maybe a last turn Iron Man plus our 1 cost card to push our win condition. Now it seems too simple to work well, but in some limited testing that I did, I continued to climb with this list, and I feel like we shouldn't with a list like this, but we did. Matching up against some tier 1 decks, some ongoing Spectrum decks, some Death Wave disposition style decks. This deck can flood so much power onto the board that a lot of times that last turn arrow or leader play is much less impactful, because we fill up our board and a leader, they're not going to have enough space to copy all of the cards that we play on that final turn. Plus, if we're playing them into the Angela lane, then they're not going to get the upside of buffing up an Angela, while we will. And so with the brief deck explanation out of the way, with a Kazar Zoo, we're just going to flood the board essentially. There is some finessing and some strategy to it, but let's hop over into a couple of games and I will show you how to navigate it. All right, so first up we have Spirit 929, and the first location we get is the Peak, which is one of the more rare locations. You don't see it all that often. We just barely miss having our Iron Man inverted, which would have been probably the best thing that could have happened to us. So we're gonna go ahead and throw our Angela onto the board on turn 1. Turn 2, we're going to go ahead and throw our Nightcrawler, which is inverted, so they just switch roles a little bit, which is fine. Typically, you want to drop Angela first anyways, but our Nightcrawler is going to be very, very unimpactful. And then the middle location, Space Throne, is actually a bit of an issue for us. This deck operates on pushing a lot of power wide very, very well. But without being able to do that, Space Throne becomes a potential issue for us. And so I think what we do is let's lean into Ant-Man. We're going to do armor. We might even do an Iron Man eventually into the Baxter Building lane, Because if we can win that location, then I think we can win the peak as well, depending on what kind of card or what kind of list the opponent's running. Although Scorpion is one that definitely hurts us quite a bit. And so let's keep an eye on the Sunspot. If it grows too large, then we probably will need to pivot. For now, let's throw our Mojo into Baxter Building. If they cap this one out, then, oh well, I guess they just did. Okay, never mind. They're not, well, okay. So we get the disadvantage. Our Angel is not going to buff up from our Mojo, unfortunately. But they do have this one capped out. We know that this is a solid like in, so we can do something like a blue Marvel here. That's going to buff up all of our cards. We will eventually either move our Nightcrawler here or here, and then play our Squirrel Girl into the peak. And then we will also play our Iron Man into this far right lane on that final turn, because we want to try to elevate this power. If we can beat them here, I think we can beat them anywhere. It's just like New York. So they play a Korg and a Nightcrawler. They could be trying to buff up their one costs as well, or just letting their Sunspot absorb some additional energy. Now, if we move our Nightcrawler over and our Iron Man, that's going to be a 2-power swing here, so that pushes us to 8, plus the 3 from Ant-Man, so that pushes us to 9, 10, 11, which that is going to then be doubled to 22. Unless they just play 1 energy this turn, that is going to allow us to find the win condition here. Not great. It's definitely not great, but it is doable. And so let's go ahead and lock this one in. I think we have an okay shot. I don't think it's phenomenal, but I think it's an okay shot. And so they play an arrow into the Space Throne, which actually turns out to be fine. Arrow, I don't know if it was just based on the last card that we played, or if it was just a random 50-50 or what, because we played our Iron Man first, and then we played our Squirrel Girl. So Arrow pulled the Squirrel Girl. I wonder if Arrow's tech pulls the last card that was played first and then kind of works backwards. Kind of like an inverse leader. But either way, since Iron Man retained or stayed in the Baxter Building lane, we were able to find our win condition there, which then helped us find and keep our win condition in the peak as well. And actually, Squirrel Girl is going toe-to-toe with Arrow here. Let's go ahead and jump over into another one. Alright, so next up we have Zadig, and the first location is a Teelan, which is going to make us shuffle our cards back into our deck after turn 3. So typically where we want to hold some of our resources, find a strategic way to drop them. With this deck and this turn, or with this deck and this matchup, we're going to want to flood our power onto the board. Oh wow, what a strange match. So it looks like they're running a Hela deck list. They had a Blade, they discarded Hulk. So it looks like they're probably running Hela. We get the Triskelion, so we're going to be flooding a lot of useless cards onto the board, or we're into our deck to then potentially be redrawn later. It's just so strange. And so we can do 2 cards here. We could do an Ant-Man and a Mojo. I don't think this list is going to be running a Killmonger. Based off of what we've seen, I don't think we have to worry about the Killmonger play. Since we're deep in pool 3, Killmonger is not used anywhere near as often as early pool 3 or late pool 2. And so we don't have to worry about it quite as much. And so let's do the Ant-Man and Mojo in the Triskelion lane. We are going to shuffle our cards after this turn and just shuffle a bunch of just junk in there. Wow, so they discarded a Galactus. So that's making their Hela resummon less impactful here. But Galactus, they could have used or had pulled into Grand Central, and I think it would have been fun to see, even if it wouldn't have been, that strategic or strong of a play. We could do Lady Sif, which would discard our Iron Man. We don't really want to do that. We have Squirrel Girl that will be able to flood the board on the last turn. I think what we're going to do here is just play our Angela into the far left lane. We have Nightcrawler that will be able to move out. They have Calling Wing, so they discard their armor here. So they don't have great cards here either. I think we play Cosmo into the Grand Central as a way to protect any maybe they pull into their Hela, maybe they pull into a discard card. I think Cosmo in Grand Central is going to protect us. We're also going to play our Squirrel Girl early. That way we don't have the downside of potentially pulling Squirrel Girl in Grand Central. We're going to have the upside of either doing Iron Man, which is great, or Lady Sif, which is also fine since we don't have to worry about it triggering because of the Cosmo. And so let's go ahead and drop that over there. They do a morph into our Iron Man, which is unfortunate. They have 2 cards left in hand. We don't know exactly what those look like here. What we're hoping for is maybe a Hela to pull out of their hand. That way they no longer have it to utilize. No, it is a Swordmaster, which isn't fantastic for us. And so on the final turn, we have Chavez that can be played. If they have their Hela, then they just win. If not, then I think we move our Nightcrawler over here. That will buff up our Ant-Man. We play our Chavez into this location. Again, not a standard game. The Triskelion plus the Attilan location made it very, very obscure to find a win condition. It's only 1 cube. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one, see if we can find a more traditional game. All right, so next up we have Buck. About all from their name that I'm going to read is Buck. The first location is Kunlun, so we will be able to buff up our Nightcrawler by moving it over into that location. But I think we wait a little bit before dropping our Nightcrawler. I think we kind of hold it to see, one, what the opponent's going to play, what it looks like they're running. Oh, so they do a Sunspot into the far right lane. They could be running something that runs an Adam Warlock, and they're going to want to try to swing at this far right location. So I think I'm actually going to do a Mojo over into this lane as well. But I don't really want... let's go ahead and do our 1-cost cards. I was going to do a Mojo, but typically if they're running a Sunspot, we usually won't have to worry about a Killmonger. And so this is going to add a little bit of disruption to their cards in their hand. We have the 2 1-cost cards that we can just have on the board and start buffing up later. We now have Ant-Man and Mojo. So what are they running that runs the Sentinel Sunspot combo? It's very, very interesting. We could cap out this location, which honestly we might. We might cap this one out, let them know that if they play too many cards here, they're gonna be outmatched by Mojo. We have Nightcrawler as a way to move over into Kunlun. We have other cards that are gonna buff this lane up further later. So we have a pretty big power push in the Fisk Tower as is. Now, if they do something like a Professor X here, it's kind of unfortunate. They could outpace us and outpower us, but they can't. Because of the Avengers compound, they're going to have to play their cards that they play on turn 5 into the Avengers compound lane. We want to drop both of these. Typically, we don't want to play Chavez. I would rather do an Iron Man to elevate our power on that last turn. And so I'm actually going to wait a moment. We're not going to play anything on turn 4. We're going to let them just play a little bit of power, see what they have. They could be running a Devil Dino deck. If they run Devil Dino here, then we are in a bit of trouble. I don't think we can outpace a Devil Dino in the Avengers compound lane. But let's go ahead and do our Blue Marvel. We will most likely move Nightcrawler out, do an Iron Man and a Squirrel Girl. That will cap out this lane, it'll cap out this location, but it's still a relatively weak play overall. And so Blue Marvel does buff up our cards. They did skip on turn 5, so we anticipate the Infinite play coming in. That actually changes our pathing a little bit. Since I anticipate the Infinite play coming, I think we do something like Nightcrawler over here. That'll bring him to a 5 power card. Squirrel Girl here will be a 2 power card, so that pushes us to 7. It also refills the Fisk Tower lane. Well, actually, we need to make sure that we win the Fisk Tower lane. And so if we do the Squirrel, we actually lose 1 power in this location. So I think we're going to push an Iron Man. It's going to be overkill, but I think we're going to push an Iron Man into Fisk Tower here. Either that or a Cosmo. Let's do an Iron Man. We have the Squirrel Girl that'll push power here and here, and we'll just kind of go from there. They did snap, so they're confident in whatever they're playing. We'll see. We'll see if it's win-worthy. So in the middle location, they play their 1 card. Is it enough? Is it an arrow? Is it, it's a Devil Dino. It's a big Devil Dino, which of course is not the Infinite that we were anticipating, but we still find the win condition by elevating our Fisk Tower lane up over, well enough over. We have the win condition in Kunlun by moving our Nightcrawler over, and we just barely find the win condition. I fully anticipated the Infinite play, But this one was just like a weaker version of the Infinite. This is where I thought they would have played the Infinite had they dropped it, and we were able to find the win condition anyways. Now, these are not all traditional games, but we did climb in about 4 games. I cut one of them because it was against a bot, but in 4 games, we were able to climb about 5 to 8 cubes. The deck itself has performed fairly well. Of course, it is a very small sample size, but I think a Pool 3 Kazar Zoo is probably just as viable in Pool 3 whenever you're not seeing a lot of killmongers. And so if you're seeing a lot of lane lockdown, if you're seeing a lot of things that like to use Professor X, so right now we're seeing a lot of Spectrum ongoing decks, I think you'll be able to outpace the Professor X portion of those decks by being able to flood a lot of power onto the board, and then you can still sneakily buff it up later on in the game. As hard as it is to say, I think Kazar Zoo is viable even in Pool 3, and really the only thing that we changed between our Pool 2 and our Pool 3 list was switching out Korg for Mojo, and Mojo just gives us that little bit of protection in making the opponent not want to fully cap out one of the locations. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. And as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.